Thank you, Mr. LaHood. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Molinar, is recognized for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Brothers, thank you for being here with us today. And I was looking through your background, and I noticed you were with the Department of Defense. And I wondered if you could tell me, with the research and the work that you're doing now versus the research that's done at the Department of Defense, what are the similarities and differences between Homeland Security, Science and Technology, and Department of Defense?
So a major similarity is the importance of the missions. I mean, the fundamental importance of the missions of the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security. Major differences have to do with the difference in the budgets of the departments. The fact that a lot of what we do buy, what our components buy, are off the shelf. The fact that, for example, particularly for our first responder stakeholders, affordability is a big concern. Whereas Department of Defense, you may find work in hypersonics, for example, you would not find that type of work in DHS. That said, where our challenges may not be to exploit new types of propulsion technologies, our challenges are to get effective capabilities to our stakeholders that have minimal training time and much smaller budgets. So whereas the Department of Defense, the resources are there to do significant training, that's not necessarily so with our stakeholders.
Okay. And then I noticed the integrated product teams, you have 5 different areas. Is that too many? I mean, it seems like a pretty, I mean, they're all very complicated, challenging areas. Are there one or two that you prioritize over the other ones?
I don't think so. I think the integrated product teams actually came from the QHSR. So if you look at the different mission sets, that's where they were derived. And I think that there were strong reasons for having that set of missions defined in the QHSR, and that's why we have the IPT set up that way.
Okay. And then do you ever, when you have agencies that would have a common interest, is there ever kind of this concept of skin in the game where you have agencies contributing to pooling resources to fund a project?
So, for example, we have some of the work we're doing on the border, sir. Customs and Border Protection is working with us, is co-funding some of that work. So the answer to your question is yes.
Okay. And have you been able to find, I'm sure just with your experience in defense as well as, you know, the other areas, do you feel like we're doing this the most efficient way? Or, you know, I can imagine at a large corporation when they have a research component, you know, sometimes it's centralized and different entities feed into that. And that other places, each of the different entities would have their own research component. Do you feel that we're doing things the best way, most efficient way possible here in the federal government?
So I appreciate you bringing that up. Because of time constraints, I wasn't able to talk about that in my opening statement. But I think that structure is one that we're trying to implement right now. So when I was in the Department of Defense, one of my challenges was trying to understand how to make the Department of Defense laboratories more effective, if you will. And I started looking at different business models, corporate models. And it's just like what you say. If you go to a lot of the large corporations, what you find is they'll have a central research facility that tends to look at cross-cutting, more basic research areas. Then the business areas, whether, let's take a defense contractor, they might have electronic warfare business unit, they might have a platforms business unit, communications business unit. Each one of these business units independently will have their own R&D section as well. This will be more applied. What I found with the more effective of these corporations was there was a constant interplay between the staff at the central research facility and those at the business unit. Why is that important? It's important because you need the researchers to understand the market dynamics, and you need the applied engineers to understand the art of the possible from the basic research. And so so we've done that. We started what we call a Pioneer Program. The Pioneer Program actually puts our staff into, right now in the Coast Guard, for example, into their R&D center. We've also put our staff on the borders to understand how the border operators operate. So I think, getting to your point, a more efficient operation is that type of model, and that's something we're trying to do right now. We've already had a number of different these Pioneer events. We're setting up work with the Coast Guard to collaborate on research right within the Coast Guard. So I think that is an effective model.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Brothers, for being here. Let me pony a little bit on Mr. Molinar's first question, because we are actively in budget talks even as we speak today, and hopefully being good stewards of the people's money. What is S&T doing to ensure that DHS is not duplicating other research in other federal agencies? And how, the second part of that question, how do you guys prioritize your research?
Okay, so the first part of the question,
Okay.
right now, one of the Secretary's Unity of Effort initiative, we're involved in the Joint Requirements Council. The Joint Requirements Council really does the vetting of acquisition programs and these kinds of things, developing requirements, et cetera. We're part of that process. And as being part of that process, we're able to give our input into the art of the possible, into what technology is out there. Internally in S&T, what we're trying to do, I think we've done an effective job of this, is to give our program managers, our leaders, access to a variety of different tools to understand what is out there. So centers of excellence were mentioned earlier, so access to university programs. Laboratories were mentioned earlier as well. There are laboratories. There's industry as well.
Do y'all guys share any computer programs that would actually send an alert if you're doing research on the same topic?
I can't, so what we do have is the ability to influence the acquisition through the process of the Joint Requirements Council. I can't say we have a computer program that generates alerts on everyone's desk, but we have effective input into the acquisition review board information.
Okay. And the second part, the prioritization of the research.
The prioritization of the research is now being done based on the Secretary's direction through this integrated product team structure. And this is where we have components who collectively evaluate what capability gaps there are. We then base our research on what those gaps, what gaps come out of that process.
And I'm assuming you guys have regular meetings that you look at this research and say, well, this one needs to go to the top, and this one can be
correct. So we have so we have portfolio reviews as well. Okay. So once we have defined what direction we'll take in terms of our prioritization of our investments, we then do an annual review on these investments.
And what is the S&T's role in the DHS acquisitions?
So we have authority to do operational tests, to oversee operational test and evaluation, and we're now getting involved in the system engineering up front for acquisition programs, as well as developmental test and engineering as well. Okay. So it's the testing and engineering up front, back end, and system engineering up front.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abraham.